In the 1800s, Russia was the largest and most densely populated country in Europe. It also was blessed with a good amount of natural resources, which was perfect for industrialization, but Russia was still behind the West. Um, People in the western section of Europe did not like Russia's old world style of government, and some of the rulers in Russia tried to bring westernization to Russia, but were not very successful. In the West, the Enlightenment, the French Revolution had all influenced reforms, but these reforms had no influence on Russian Tsars, who were the Russian leaders. In 1800, Tsar Alexander I thought about making reforms, but Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812 changed his mind. At the Congress of Vienna, Tsar Alexander I agreed that when it came to suppressing any thought or action, it should be done if it threatened the monarchy. In 1825, Alexander is going to die, and a group of army officers who had learned of Western ideas while fighting Napoleon led what is known as the Decembrist revolt, and they demanded more democratic reforms. They also had hoped that the Tsar who would become in charge of Russia would have been Constantine, who was next in line to the throne, who was Alexander's brother. However, Constantine did not want the position, and their younger brother, Nicholas, took the throne. These troops refused to take an oath to Tsar Nicholas I, and they are going to revolt. The new Tsar Nicholas I is going to brutally put down these rebellions. He's going to outlaw Western books, he's going to jail intellectuals, and he's going to use secret police to root out people who opposed his regime. He was very much a dictator compared to his brother, Alexander I. Nicholas I, he is going to build Russia on three pillars that resort his absolutism. He stressed strong ties between the church and his government. He believed that the absolute power of the government should not be questioned, and he believed in the idea of nationalism and a respect for Russian traditions and ideals. Any group that disagreed with him was eliminated. He did see that there was a need to modernize his country and make economic reforms to compete with the West, but he also did not want to upset others throughout his country. He is going to die in 1855, and his son, Alexander II, is going to come into power. Alexander II is going to be very different than his father. He's going to know that reforms were not only necessary, but that they were at long last possible, as many people were demanding them. One of the things that he's going to do is in 1861, he's going to announce an end to a centuries-old policy of serfdom in Russia. This policy had ended more than 100 years prior in other European nations, but Russia was behind. When the serfs are given their freedom, they are given some land, but it's too small to support their families, and they were going to have to pay for the land. And so they would have mortgages on the property that would last almost 50 years. Getting rid of serfdom also meant that the Russian government had to reorganize itself. They had to reorganize how they collected taxes, how they provided education, and how to maintain infrastructure. They created a position in their villages known as the zemstvos, who oversaw everything. And they created a new judicial system to look over the law throughout the nation. When Alexander II's reforms did not work, the high hopes of his people, especially among students and other intellectuals, quickly came to a halt, and new movements started to form. One of these movements was known as the Land and Freedom Movement, and it came off the heels of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. And the Land and Freedom Movement felt that people should all be equal. And they decided that students should be the ones to educate the Russian peasants who made up most of society in Russia. Their plan was to gain their trust and prepare the peasants for an upcoming revolution. The problem with this, though, was the peasants did not trust the students and turned them over to Russian police. Tsar Alexander II was very lenient on penalties, and he let it be known that if this happened again, heavy penalties would be handed down. After the crackdown, the land and freedom movement split apart, and a more radical group is going to form in 1879, and it's known as the People's Will. And this group is going to be dedicated to completely overthrowing the Tsar. They decided the only way to do this was to assassinate him, and in March 1881, the People's Will members are going to assassinate Tsar Alexander II. Alexander II's reign is going to be known for two things: his attempt at reform and the major opposition against him. When he dies, his son is going to take over, and his name is Alexander III. And he is going to respond to his father's assassination swiftly and brutally. After quickly killing his father's assassins, he is going to repeal all of his dad's reforms and decided to increase the power of the Tsar by re-centralizing the government. He's going to strengthen the secret police and unleash them on the people. His goal was to suppress the cultures of all non-Russian people, and he deemed that Russia would only have one language, one church, and one government. These actions confirmed in the minds of revolutionaries that Russia would no longer have an absolute government with direct control over the Russian people. Alexander III is going to create the seeds that are going to doom his family and end their dynasty eventually in 1918.